He was on a mission from God, and the mission to get the band back together. We're going to talk about the Gospel of Mark. In a couple previous videos, I read the entire Gospel of Mark, and I read the New Revised Standard Version. I'm also going to refer today to the King James Bible as well. I want to talk about maybe like 12 points, because 12 seems to be an important number in this gospel. Not only are there 12 apostles, but there's 12 of some other things as well that gets mentioned in the text. And now we can ask, what's the importance? This is the first point, why the number 12? And people have said different things. Obviously, when you talk about Jesus as Christos, the anointed, the Messiah, which is very clear from the very beginning. This gospel starts, and we're going to talk about this idea that this is the first gospel in a moment. But this begins with the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. This is the New Revised Standard Version. The King James says the beginning of the gospel instead of good news, the gospel. So this calls him Jesus Christ from the very beginning, right? He's the Christ, he's the Messiah, he's also the Son of God. And it has been pointed out that throughout the entire gospel, Jesus is continually being referred to as the Son of God, and the Messiah as well. But and the messianic secret, as it has been called, is that Jesus does not want his identity revealed, at least not to some. To some, it is revealed. But you have it at the beginning. Jesus is the Son of God, and then throughout the entire text, you have that Jesus has the authority of God. He's able to do all these miraculous things, and which only God can do. Only God, for example, can forgive sins, and Jesus has that ability. So that's one of the most important things I wanted to bring up is Jesus. From the very beginning of this gospel, he's the Messiah and he is the Son of God. It's very clear. The angel says, let's see. And just as he was coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, the beloved. With you I am well pleased." So that appears to be God saying, "You are my Son, the beloved." So Jesus is God's beloved Son, and that's clear. And that is at the very end. It has also been pointed out that this is a different kind of Messiah. Jesus is a Messiah who's not going to restore Israel. He's not going to bring the restoration. In that sense, he's going to have to die like a common criminal on the cross, but he will be resurrected, and that resurrection will somehow redeem the world and make it possible for everyone for everyone's sins to be forgiven. Now, this is fascinating. And let's talk just for a moment about the idea that this is the first of the four Gospels. According to tradition, this is actually not the first. Matthew is the first Gospel. But scholars today, most scholars apparently believe that this was the first one, and it was written probably in the early 70s. After the temple was destroyed, that there was this war that happened between 66 and 70, and it ended with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And scholars believe that, or maintain, let's not say believe, they maintain that this gospel must have been written after the destruction of the temple. Although you could say Christian apologists would say, no, well, Jesus predicted that the temple, why couldn't it have been written before? Why couldn't Jesus have predicted that the temple would be destroyed? So, go figure. I'm not sure if we're going to answer that question. This debate is probably going to be endless, right? And everything comes down to, I think, what works for you, and partly it's what you want to believe. But also, scholars will say, well, it might be what I want to believe, but it's also based more in actual fact and actual scientific research. But who's to say that scientific research is infallible? I think that's part of it, is new evidence keeps coming to light for all this stuff. So how do we really know, right? I might say more about this later, but why is the number 12? Let's talk about the number 12. So Jesus as the Son of God, right? So the Son, S-O-N, and S-U-N are, they're homonyms. They sound alike. So Jesus as the Son, right? You have the sun, and you have the zodiac, right? The 12 points of the zodiac that and with the sun in the middle. So that has been, if you've ever seen Zeitgeist, the movie Zeitgeist, it goes into that, that's where that came from. Possible. The number 12 is important also in the East. 12 is like saying 12 years, for example, is like saying 10,000 hours. Like, in order to master something, you need to do something for 12 years. So that's one idea. Like in India, if you do a practice for 12 years, you are thought to be the master of that practice. You've mastered it in that time. So 12, and then you could talk about the number 13. So, because Jesus would be the 13th, right? If there's 12 apostles, then Jesus makes 13. Obviously, the number 13 is a very interesting number. It's considered to be an unlucky number. There's even a phobia about the number 13, which is called triskaidekaphobia. This is a Greek term, triskaidekaphobia, which means the fear of the number 13. But the number 13 is not. Why does it need to be scary? Why does there need to be that superstition about it? It's the 1 and the 3, man. It's the 3 that are 1, right? Maybe, but in Hebrew, the word for love is ahava, and that the numerical equivalent of that word is 13, and the word for 1, echad, in Hebrew, the numerical value of that is 13. So 13 is not necessarily, one love, right? 13 and 13 right there. So I wanted to just mention that. At the end, obviously, there's not 12 apostles, there's 11. And the text actually mentions that there's 11 because Judas betrayed Jesus, so he's not really one of the apostles anymore. Although you could make an argument that Mary Magdalene takes his place. Because all of a sudden, at the end, Mary Magdalene is playing like a big role or something. It seems, it's unclear. Why does Mary Magdalene all of a sudden take such an important role, or at least be given such a prominence in the text? Now, the first thing after that voice says, the Spirit descended like a dove, right? Jesus goes into the desert. So let's read that for a moment. He goes out into the wilderness. It doesn't say the desert necessarily. Let's see, hold on a second. Immediately the Spirit driveth him into the wilderness. I think both say the wilderness. He goes to the wilderness. 40 days, tempted of Satan, and was with the wild beasts, and the angels ministered unto him. That's all it says. Right? And then he goes and he gathers, he gets the band back together. He gathers the apostles. Now, in the wilderness, he is tempted by Satan, of Satan. Tempted by, the one says tempted by, and the other says tempted of Satan. Now, the later Gospels flesh that out a little bit more, but that's a very interesting thing. 40 days. He's 40 days, right, before he begins his mission, which is his mission is the remission of sins. I noticed that the King James calls it the remission of sins, and the other calls it forgiveness of sins. Now, another interesting thing is that Jesus goes and gets his apostles. They're all simple people, and they immediately follow him. There's no question. They're not like, who are you? They just put down what they're doing and they follow him. Put down their fishing poles or whatever it is. I noticed, I looked at the Gospel of Thomas, and I'm going to do another video just on the sayings of Jesus. But the Gospel of Thomas is considered to be a Gnostic gospel, although it's debated whether it's really truly Gnostic or not. But it was discovered in, I believe, in 1948 in Nag Hammadi, Egypt. And it's 114 sayings of Jesus. It doesn't have any, it's not like the other Gospels that tell all about the life of Jesus. It only gives the sayings. And many of the sayings, most of the sayings are in the Gospels. And I noticed that many of the sayings in the Gospel of Thomas, which has been dated earlier than the other Gospels, or some scholars believe it's earlier, and that the other Gospels based themselves on it. Many of those sayings are in Mark. So that's another interesting thing. I was also going to talk about Jesus as the first cult leader, right? Today we talk about cults, right? And it's a bad thing. It's a bad word. But if you look at who Jesus was, in this gospel, and probably the other gospels as well, we'll have to go into the other gospels, but Jesus is like the classic prototypical cult leader. He's collecting his apostles. He's telling them, now this is the family now. And you got to leave your biological family and follow me. Leave everything and follow me. Give everything to what we're doing. Have faith in what I'm saying. And he rebukes his disciples. He puts them down. He seems to do all sorts of things which today we would be like, what? I mean people are. I just watched the Louis C.K. thing about Jesus, where he talks about Jesus cursing the fig tree, which happens in this gospel, where Jesus curses a fig tree. And it seems to be symbolic, from what I got, was that Jesus is saying, see, or Mark is saying about Jesus, see, this guy can do anything. He can even curse a fig tree, and the fig tree will wither. The only thing he can't do, he can do all these things. The only thing he can't do is save himself, right? He can't save himself. And he even prays to God to take the cup from me, in the garden, when the apostles are all falling asleep, Jesus prays 3 times to God to not go through with this. But Jesus ends by saying, even though I asked that, but not my will, but thy will. Right? Not my will, but thy will. And it is, and the other thing that Jesus says is at the very end is Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which is, it's Aramaic actually, and it means, my God, why have thou forsaken me? Which is, fascinating that he would say that. That's actually a line from one of the Psalms. That's the beginning of, I forget which Psalm it is, but it's the beginning of one of the Psalms. But why would Jesus pray to God if he knows that he's supposed to die? Why would he say that? And why would he pray to God to not go through with this? That's a mystery. I'm sure there's people that have talked a lot about that. I have not gotten into that subject, but it's a fascinating thing. It's like Jesus knows what's going to happen to him. He's saying, from like midway through the gospel, he's telling his disciples, I'm gonna be crucified, and I will be resurrected, and I will appear to you. So he knows it's going to happen. One thing he says, my dad used to say this, and I don't know if my dad knew where it came from, but there's this quote, which is, you're either with me or against me, right? You're either with us or against us. And that's what Jesus is saying to the apostles, is the people, if people believe and have faith, their sins will be forgiven. And if not, they are condemned. It's like this with the fig tree. It's like, if the fig tree bears fruit for the Lord, then all is well. But if not, you are cursed. And this is where I think people like myself have an issue with Jesus of the Gospels. Is that really what Jesus was teaching? Was Jesus teaching that if people do not believe in him, that they will be condemned? I could understand it symbolically, like if someone loses their faith in love, they condemn themselves. If you lose hope and lose faith and lose the light of love, you are probably going to be in the dark. You're going to be sad, depressed, lonely. I can understand that. I cannot necessarily, and I think many people have a problem with this idea of, unless you believe in Jesus, that he died for your sins, that you're going to go to hell, or you're going to be, condemned for eternity. Eternal damnation. That's quite unfortunate, I would say. Many will come in my name. That whole thing at the end where Jesus says, many will come in my name, and they will do signs and wonders to lead astray even the elect, right? Even people like you, that people will come in my name, but that's also like an easy way to eliminate the competition. It's like, don't follow anyone else. That's a true cult leader. It's like, don't follow anyone else except me, right? I'm the only one. Now, you could understand this in another way, and I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, on the surface, this does not look good. On the surface, this really looks like pretty screwed up. or you could say, at the very least, it's like a mixed bag. It's like Jesus saying some really cool things and doing some really amazing things, beautiful things. And then there's other things here that are like, WTF, what's really going on there? So you're either with me or against me. You're either going to follow me or you're doomed. You're damned. At the very end, I wanted to point out, something that I thought was really interesting is that there's the ending. There's two endings of Mark that that attached later. It really ends where the women were scared and they flee and they didn't tell anyone about what they saw at the tomb. But then there's a shorter and a longer thing that got tacked on later, apparently, got added later. But one of the things it says here at the end, I'm just going to read this. It says, later he appeared to the 11, not the 12, because of Judas. He appeared to the 11 themselves as they were sitting at the table, and he upbraided them for their lack of faith and stubbornness, because they had not believed those who saw him after he had risen. And he said to them, go into all the world and proclaim the good news to the whole creation. The one who believes and is baptized will be saved, and the one who does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will accompany those who believe. By using my name, they will cast out demons. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up snakes in their hands. And if they drink any deadly thing, it will not hurt them. They will lay their hands on the sick, and they will recover. So there's about 5 things that are mentioned. 2 of them are very interesting, which is the handling snakes, pick up snakes, and drinking anything and it won't hurt them. Like you could drink poison and it doesn't hurt you. Well, it's possible, take the name of Jesus and you do that, and maybe you will be, if you have faith. I don't know. I'm just saying it sounds, we've all heard of speaking in tongues. We've all heard of healing, through faith healing. We've all heard of exorcisms, casting out demons. But the other 2 are a little bit like snake handling and drinking anything and that doesn't hurt you. That's a little, I haven't heard of a lot of, I know that there are groups that actually do that stuff, but it's not a mainstream thing. The other stuff is more mainstream, right? The thing where Jesus says to his disciples in chapter 4, he says, when he was alone, those who were around him, along with the 12, asked him about the parables. So he's not only telling the 12 apostles, he's telling others too this. And he said to them, to you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God, but for those outside, everything comes in parables, in order that they may indeed look but not perceive, and may indeed listen but not understand, so that they may not turn again and be forgiven. Wow. It sounds like Jesus is being purposefully deceptive so that people won't be forgiven. Wow, that's amazing. It's like, maybe he's saying that unless you become a follower of Jesus, you won't understand the meaning of the parable. I'm sure there's many ways to explain that, but on the surface, again, it does not look good. It looks again, Jesus is a cult leader. He's saying, you guys get the real teaching, and all those people out there, they're not worthy. They're not going to get it. So I just say these parables to so that to show them that they're not, demonstrate that they're not worthy. Who was the young boy? So there's this young boy at the end of the gospel, towards the end, who, let me just find this real quick. Basically, the young boy, a certain young man, this is at the end of chapter, 1451, after the betrayal and arrest of Jesus, a certain young man was following him, wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They caught hold of him, but he left the linen cloth and ran off naked. This is like apropos of nothing. All of a sudden you have this young boy who, he's wearing a linen cloth, and the guards caught hold of him and apparently took his linen cloth, and he ran off naked. Now, I for whatever reason, I connect this to the young man at the end. It says, when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified." So I connect that young man with this young man who people say was an angel, right, and sitting at the right hand of Jesus. You also, there's this whole thing about sitting at the right and the left, right? And Jesus says to his disciples, they're arguing among themselves about who's the greatest and who is going to be at the right and the left of Jesus, right? And at the end, when he's on the cross, is two criminals are on his right and left side. That we could go into as well. That's a whole nother thing. But I think I covered a lot of I just want to say a couple things. What Jesus says about his family, that basically this idea of my family is those who believe in me, and anyone who doesn't is not my family, even my biological family, which again is very, very cultish. We'd have to read that passage. I don't know if I'm going to read it right now, but I want to read the passage in chapter 12:28, where he talks about the first commandment. There's a scribe who asks him, and the scribe is actually listening to Jesus, and Jesus gives him a blessing, and the scribe asks him, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus answered, what is the first commandment? Right? What is the first commandment? That's King James says, what is the first commandment? I think the other version says that as well. And Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And that's the Shema. But the Shema really says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Which is basically what that says. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. Ve'ahavta et Adonai b'chol lavavcha, b'chol nafshecha, u'b'chol meildecha. Now Jesus adds something there. That says, you shall love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, and all thy might, or strength. And Jesus adds mind. He says, with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. And then the scribe repeats it back to him, and he says, well, master, thou hast said the truth, for there is one God, and there is none other but he. Oh, actually, and Jesus adds, and the second is, namely this, you shall love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. So those two are the most important commandments. And the scribe says, and to love God with all thy heart, with all thy understanding, and with all the soul, and with all the strength. Now, the scribe says something different back to him, and there's a different order of words. So I thought that was interesting. to love his neighbor as himself is more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. Now he adds that, the scribe adds that. And when Jesus saw that he answered discreetly, he said unto him, Thou art not far from the kingdom of God. And no man after that durst ask him any question. So that shut everyone up. Anyway, I hope this was a little bit interesting. I think this is all fascinating, especially because I have not really focused on the Gospels, and definitely not on the Gospel of Mark. And I didn't really even know that most scholars, not only do they think it was the first, but many scholars think it's the best. It's their favorite gospel. It seems to be really put together in a way that is it's a literary, it's a true, there's a lot of intention and a lot of thought that went into this gospel. And I'm sure that there's a lot of pieces that I'm not even aware of yet of how the gospel was put together, and you'd have to go to a professional scholar to really, but I'm doing my little part. I'm interested personally in what Jesus said, because I am a student of A Course in Miracles, and A Course in Miracles, which I will talk more about. I have been talking about it on this channel, but A Course in Miracles is making some corrections in the Jesus as presented in the Gospels, and he's trying to get back to the original teaching of Christ, which does not condemn. You know, there's a saying in A Course in Miracles: love does not condemn. So you know, there's no damnation. No one is left out. There is no elect. There's only those who choose to be, choose to go the way of love, but everyone is included. No one is left out. Everyone is still in the love of God, no matter what. And anything else is just an illusion and is a nightmare that we have created. The ego has created. So that's what I've been looking into, going and what has been definitely been on my mind and in my heart quite a lot, and seems to be a very helpful teaching for me. And I'm looking at the Gospels in light of that, and it's fascinating. So I hope you'll continue with me if you're interested on this journey, and I will say more soon. Thank you for listening, and talk soon. Thanks.